Well, we'll call the meeting to order at 4:38 p.m. This is the September 15th, 2022 meeting of the Council on Developmental Services. My name is Rick Rothstein. I'm the Secretary of the Council. I am filling in today as acting chair because our chair, Kevin Zengler, and co-chair, Karen Levesque, are not in a position to be on the call virtually today. Karen is attending by phone. So we are expecting a lot of guests today. I can't tell from the screen right now how many we have. So I thought it would be appropriate if we would go through a quick round of introductions and perhaps why we're here.
Rick.
Again, my name.
I'm so sorry, Rick. Please continue. I apologize.
Joe, you can interrupt me anytime. Anyway, so my name is Rick Rothstein. I'm the parent of a 39-year-old young man who lives in a CLA in West Hartford. I've been on the council for several years and also been on the North Regional Advisory Council and been in leadership at a large nonprofit. So kind of go around the horn. Perhaps Christine, how about you? You have to turn your mic on.
Sorry, it just took it a while. I'm Christine Hainsworth-Strauss. I have four children, but three who are on the DDS rolls. I have one who now lives out in the supported apartments in Canton, and two live at home, and we work with two different employment agencies for their day services.
Thank you. Adrian?
Hello, Adrian Benjamin. I have a 26-year-old daughter who has severe autism and ID. She gets services from HARP and lives in a group home in Wethersfield, and she also gets day services from there. And I've been on the council a couple of years, sort of a decade. That's it. That's enough.
Okay. Joe?
Hi, everybody. Joe Carvalho, DDS. I work for Commissioner Sheff. I am the Executive Secretary for Commissioner Sheff. Just very quickly, for anyone who's joined us by phone, I did want to, and this is why I interrupted the chairman earlier, so I apologize. But I just wanted to let anybody know who's joined us by phone that to unmute yourself, you need to press *6. So just for everyone's awareness in case you called in. But yeah, that's me.
Okay, glad to have you back. Rick Lenz?
Hi, my name's Rick Lenz. I'm the other Rick on the council. I'm the father of 6 sons, the youngest of whom, Danny, is about to turn 42, believe it or not.
Whoa.
He is one of the people who has benefited from the supports offered to people with disabilities. He lives in an apartment with a roommate every day. And this is a kid who, when he was born, the doctor said he might never walk or talk. So he's had a remarkable career so far. And I've been on the council for several years, and my main motivation is the hope we can extend the kind of supports Danny has received to as many other people as possible.
Thank you. Beth?
Sorry. My name is Beth Lambert. I'm a parent of a 29-year-old son with autism. He receives services through LARC. I'm also on the board of Connecticut FEAT, Families for Effective Autism Treatment, and a board-certified behavior analyst.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for passing around the invitation to so many folks. Diana? You're muted, Diana.
Now am I unmuted? Can you hear me?
So, yeah.
Okay, sorry. My name is Diana Manone. I am a retired special education teacher who worked for the Department of Developmental Services at Southbury Training School, first as an aide and then as a teacher over a 33-year period. I also had a brother who lived at Southbury for 40 years and then moved to a group home for 4 years before he passed away. He had a very rare syndrome, and we were happy to say he lived for 57 years, but we miss him every day. And I just want to congratulate Joe. Good to see you. Thank you.
A person who should need no introduction, Shannon.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shannon Giacovino. I am the DDS ombudsperson, and I should also add that I am the niece of an individual with an intellectual disability. And I don't know if everybody knows that about me, but I thought I'd share that.
Yes. Donna?
Hi,
Donna Cohen?
I'm Donna Cohen, and I really think I have two of these things open somehow, and I can't figure out how to shut it. So I'll probably go off and come back. I'm good at this. Other than that, I have a 30-year-old daughter diagnosed with autism and an intellectual disability. And she used to go to a program, but then COVID hit, and now we self-direct.
Shannon's there.
Okay. Kevin Bronson?
Sure. Kevin Bronson. I'm the Communications and Legislative Director at DDS.
Thank you. Michael?
Michael Beloff. I'm a parent of a 24-year-old young man with an intellectual disability and autism. He receives services from Ableist as employment supports, having just finished up Project Search. And we're trying to navigate how to manage employment services, but also keep him occupied and engaged for the other hours of the week. I also serve as treasurer of Ableist, and I've been on their board for way too long. And I also have the pleasure now of serving on the ARPA advisory committee, helping to look at DDS services and use the ARPA money to help revamp the services.
Thank you. I can't see many of your names, so if you, I haven't called on you yet. There's someone named BT.
Oh, that might be me.
You're muted,
Hi.
Barbara.
There you go, Barbara.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
You can now.
Oh, okay. I just joined the meeting. So I guess we're going around doing introductions.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I am the mother of a 31-year-old young man with intellectual disability and autism. And he's been attending Ability Beyond for many, many years. And I have been on a quest to get some residential funding for him, because I think it's time for him to be in a residential placement, but that is proving to be my life's work. It is not anything that I ever imagined. The money just isn't there. The need is there, and I think we're all in this together. And I hope that participating in these kinds of forums will lead eventually to a solution for that to happen.
Okay, thank you. JN?
I believe that's Janice. If you'd like to introduce yourself, Janice. I can appreciate. Yeah, I can appreciate
So
someone.
why don't you call the roll, since you can see the full names, and anyone who we miss when we go to public comment, they still have an opportunity to introduce themselves.
100%, Commissioner. I will do that. And just for anyone else's awareness, I understand that Teams isn't always used by everybody. So if you are trying to address the group, just look for a symbol that looks like a microphone. If you see a line through it, click on it. You should be unmuted. But anywho, I will go down the list. Let's see. Has Jeremy introduced himself? Jeremy? I'll move on. Michael? Oh, sorry, you've already introduced yourself. Thank you. Forgive me if I'm mistaken. Has Pat Tyler introduced himself?
She has not.
Hi, I have not. Little disclaimer, I've just come out of the dental office after 4.5 hours and my mouth is pretty frozen. So I'm not going to talk too much, but I'm a parent of a 38-year-old woman living life in Storrs, Connecticut. And let's just say she's in a complicated transition period. And I try to compartmentalize these things. I try to have her situation inform me, but my interest in coming to the meeting is I try to think on a systemic level and what I think will help forward a better life for people with disabilities. So that's why I come to the meeting. I don't really come for her, although she could benefit. I come to see what I can do to contribute to the community, particularly those receiving the services and their families. That's my story.
Thank you, Pat. I'm just trying to look through the list here. Let's see. And forgive me, I believe there's somebody here who's listed as M and B. Have you introduced yourself yet? Yeah, feel free to introduce yourself now if you'd like.
Hello, is this am I unmuted? Can you,
Yep.
you can hear me? Okay. Hi, I'd just like to keep kind of a low profile right now because we're in an awkward situation. I'm here for my brother, 3 years younger than myself, who's intellectually disabled. He's 62 years old, and he's been in the system since he was 11. My mother, I was 14 when he was brought in, and we always maintained as much contact and connection as we could. The past few years have been rough with my own health issues. And at this point, I'm more concerned about his health issues and my participation in that. And I also want to see systemic, policy improvement. My parents moved to Connecticut from New York because Connecticut was considered the best state in the country. At the time, that was 1968. And from what I understand, we are still the best state in the country for this care for people with these disabilities. So I want to participate more in his care and the big picture for all the people who are dependent on these services. Thank you all for all that you do.
Thank you so much. I'm just trying to go through this list, see if there's anybody else. And forgive me if I'm mistaken, but has Carol Scully spoke?
No, I haven't. Hi, I'm Carol Scully. I'm the Director of Advocacy for the ARC of Connecticut, and I'm here to listen and learn. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Carol. Now I see that there are two folks who've called in. There's a phone number that ends with 8285. If you'd like to introduce yourself, please feel free. And again, if you are muted, press *6. Again, that's the phone number ending with 8285. And if you just press *6 and we still can't hear you, which we can't, that means you just muted yourself. So press *6 again. All right, I think you're there now. We can hear you. You can introduce yourself. All right, perhaps there's some technical difficulties there. We'll try the other phone number. So the person who's called in with the last 4 digits, 2941, if you would unmute yourself and introduce yourself. Again, to unmute yourself, you press *6. All right, I think that concludes everybody who has joined the meeting. Rick, please feel free to proceed if you'd like. Actually, Rick, before you do, I'm just going to mute everybody again, just so everyone can hear you. Okay, Rick?
Thank you.
All right, Rick, now you just need to unmute yourself and we'll be good to go.
And Adrian Benjamin had her hand up. This is Jordan Sheff. Adrian had her hand up there at the end of the roll call.
Go ahead, Adrian.
You forgot Patty Silva. Get Patty Silva in there and introduce herself.
So sorry, I thought she had already introduced herself. So Patty?
Patty Silva. I live in Wethersfield. I've been on the council for, what has it been, a couple of years now, but had been on quite a bit previously as well. I have a 23-year-old daughter with an intellectual disability who attends FABAR. Joe, glad to have you back. Jordan, very, very happy to hear that things are going much better. Been very worried. And Joe picks or it didn't happen. And welcome, everyone.
And I think we have one last introduction with Krista Ostashevsky, and forgive me for that omission. Krista, are you there?
She appears to be. She can introduce herself at the start of her presentation. So anyway, thank you, everyone. That did take a bit longer than I had thought, but thank you all for being here. We start each meeting with a moment of silence for those impacted by COVID-19, including our family members, the community at large, our participants, and our very dedicated staff who work with us. Okay, the next item on the agenda is public participation. Under state rules, you have up to each member who wishes to speak can speak for up to 3 minutes regarding an issue that you would like to bring to the attention of the council. So if anyone would like to speak from the public, please feel free to identify yourself, and we will accept your testimony. Okay, hearing none.
I'm sorry. I raised my hand, did that raise hand thing. I'm
okay.
On the virtual.
I see you now.
As you know, I'm here to listen to what's in the waiver, any changes that are being made and why. And the first thing that I want to say to the council is that I admire how you're trying to increase employment opportunities for people, including that competitive wage. I just want to make sure that you don't forget the people that are not capable of competitive employment. And I hope that you don't put in rules or regulations that keep people from having sub-minimum wage jobs, because employment is valuable no matter what type it is. As far as questions about the waivers, I see that the pre-vocational services are being eliminated because it doesn't meet with the current plan. But how are those services going to be provided then? I also am wondering there's incentive in there to move people from CLAs out. If a person is moved out of the CLA, is that agency able to fill the CLA position with somebody else, or is the idea to get rid of CLAs? So those are my questions.
Okay, thank you, Beth. Those are good questions, good points, and many of those are shared by many of us on the council. So we'll look forward to hearing from Krista and perhaps in the commissioner's report as well. So thank you. And the next topic would be review and approval of the previous meeting minutes from July 21st. We have not received those as yet, so I move that we table those to our next meeting in October.
Excuse me, Rick.
Hey, Rick.
Yeah.
There's other people with their hands up for public participation.
Oh, I'm sorry. They're not showing up here. Okay.
Barbara and Pat are the two in
Okay,
queue.
I'm sorry.
Rick, don't be. This is all new to you. You're good. Barbara, do you want to go first?
Yeah.
You have to unmute yourself, Barbara.
Hi, am I good? Yes, I listened to the commissioner's, one of the video clips that was posted yesterday about not getting rid of, that you want to offer a more varied selection for individuals that can participate more without the 24-hour supports. But again, I think that's great. But my son happens to need that 24-hour support. And I'm just at my wit's end to make something work. The DDS gave us a small amount of money to use an independent support broker, which we're trying to do and piece together a situation using Social Security, CFC funding, possibly a grant from DDS that isn't quite as that isn't the $150,000 or so that is needed for someone to live in a CRA or a CLA, CRS, CLA, alphabet soup. But what is the future look like, Commissioner and Mr. Rothstein, for people that are 31 or so, aging parents? They have these needs. I don't want this to turn into an emergency when I die. I want 10 years to get my son acclimated. He needs it. He wants, the family is just, we just don't know what to do to make this happen. It's a money issue. I get it. But what can I do as a parent to get the funds into the system to make this happen for my son and others before they're 40 or 50 or 60? I want him to have a life. Okay.
Yeah, well, I think we have all been there at one time or another, or we are still there. So many of us I would say the group is a strong advocate for supporting families. So yeah, we're with you with this, and there will be more diversity, but the models we have now are still necessary, and we will continue to use them. So anyway, that's where we are with that. So Pat Tyler.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully I can speak clearly enough. Anyway, my only public comment is around the new types of services that are being designed, or more flexibility and how to support people. The one thing that was striking to me in the last week on the ARPA group committee that I was on is the stark differences between the regions. Some regions are seemingly able to seamlessly, creatively address issues, while other regions are not so flexible, so to speak. So one thing I would really like to suggest is that if that's going to be the direction, to try to be more creative in the way we provide supports to people, I think there needs to be some consistency between the regions, because it's disconcerting to see what one region can do and what another region can't do. And I don't understand why that is. In such a small state, we really shouldn't have such a disparate, stark differences between what people do. So that's my only comment. I think that needs to be smoothed out, and so that it doesn't matter what part of Connecticut you live in, you're still in a small state. There should be some consistency of the way things are applied between different regions. That's it.
Well, we are in the early stages, so thank you for your comments. That's why we have a commissioner and a strong management team that will work these things out as we move forward. So I apologize for.
I believe I see one other person, Donna Cohen.
Okay, Donna, I'm sorry.
Hi, okay, I think I only have one screen open now. So I just wanted to add my voice. I'm hearing a lot of people talk about the same things that I'm struggling with. And a huge concern for me and for our family is making sure that the supports for those of us who have kids who need significant support, it doesn't go by the wayside. And sometimes it feels like we're getting a little bit left out, or sort of getting the shorter end of the stick. So I'm just encouraging everyone to remember that there is like a huge spectrum of people out there. And yeah, just wanted to add that in. I'm sure everybody remembers, but it's a very personal and emotional issue, obviously.
Okay, thank you. And now moving to the next item on the agenda is our minutes from the last meeting of July 21st. As I was saying, those minutes have not been sent out to us yet, so we're going to table that till the next meeting, which is October 20th. And now we'll move to the commissioner's report.
Rick, I believe we need a second on that motion.
Is there a motion?
Is there a second? Patty? Yep. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. For members of the council who are speaking during the meeting, remember to mention your name before you speak, so that helps with the transcription. Thank you. Commissioner Chef, you're up.
Thank you, and thanks everybody for their comments. Let me be loud and clear to start, because the group homes aren't going away. None of the effort in front of us is to eliminate 24/7 settings from our menu of services. We will, and I'll say it again, we will forever have 24/7, 24-hour a day, 7-day operated, supervised settings with people for as long as I can see into the future, which and as I've seen across the country. So group homes aren't going away. And some of our other 24-hour settings, they're not going anywhere, CRSs, CCHs. So let me just begin there. I want to cover, and I'm going to come back to the transformative work in a second, but before I get to that, there was a request from Karen just to update in my report on one item with regards to workforce issues. So the workforce crisis that we're in, both in private and in public, isn't just a Connecticut problem, as you're likely all aware, but we have had a lot of issues with low staffing at regional centers and other public programs was the specific question. The update I can give you is less than a couple of weeks ago, we finished, or maybe it's 3 weeks ago now, finished a round of job fair days. And during 3 days of job fairs at 6 locations, we made almost 200 conditional offers to employees. That still leaves us a few hundred short from where we need to be to not be operating under duress. And we have 3 more events like that set up over the next 3 months that'll cascade out. And my guess is as we approach December, we'll be looking at rebooting that process for January, because each wave of hiring, what typically follows is a wave of retirements, and then we have to do another wave of hiring, and it gets smaller in each of those cycles, but I expect us to be in a recruitment and hiring phase for the next 6 to 8 months probably, before we're at a staffing level that is sustainable. While I'm talking about workforce, let me also tell you that the workforce crisis exists outside of public. For those of you getting supports at private providers, whether that's day, in-home support, or residential, you're probably very well aware. If you're self-hiring, you know that it is hard to attract and find staff in the world we're living in. I met with providers earlier today for an hour and a half or so. It's certainly heavy on their mind. We are keen to bring some resources to the table, both through ARPA and maybe through state funds, to engage with the private sector to help them with their workforce issues. But I don't see an end to the crisis anytime soon. I think from some providers' perspectives, it has leveled off. And in a few places we've heard it's gotten a little bit better. But a little bit better than horrible is still not good. So there's plenty of work to do there. And those of you who received Shannon's report ahead of time, it's certainly if you've read that, you know that that's a common part of her work, is hearing about those concerns. Unfortunately, and as she visits people and programs and places, she sees it live and in person. So we'll continue to work on that and hopefully have some concrete updates for you on what we're doing. And hopefully, Karen, that was responsive to your request. I do expect us to bring on a few hundred more before the holidays, hopefully. So let me get back to some of the other questions that were asked that I can try to answer to. So we're not getting rid of CLAs. We are currently have a number of vacancy in CLAs we're working on filling. And I know that to Barbara and some of the others who are looking at placement issues for their loved ones, that doesn't add up. But hopefully, as we work through the process, opportunities for others not considered an emergency, but only considered urgent, may become available. So CLAs and CRSs, there was a notion out there that we're not developing anymore. We did put a moratorium on some of our routine development. As I said to the providers today, we've also made exceptions to that moratorium, and it's included in the guidance to providers, that if there's a specific need, that will get presented to the region will present it to the central office, and central office will make a decision. To date, none of those requests, to my knowledge, and I would know because I'm making the final decisions on them. I think we've proceeded with any of the special requests from providers so far with regards to additional development where needed. Typically, it's because they're either replacing a home that's not meeting the needs of the individuals who are there, or because we're working with a cohort of people that need a different environment in order to be successful living their best life. For all of you on the call, one of you mentioned the videos. It's a short video of me, Elisa, and Peter talking about some of this stuff. Elisa Velardo, our deputy commissioner, Peter Mason, our former deputy commissioner, and now back as a project manager for ARPA. I think Krista's going to talk a little bit more about ARPA later, but if you watch those videos with the announcement that came out, I think yesterday or the day before, that we're trying to share broadly, there are going to be regional question and answer sessions that'll be attended hopefully by me in all cases, and Elisa, the regional director from the specific region, and other leadership staff. And we encourage you to participate in those, and hopefully that will help inform the direction that we're headed. There was a question about the elimination of pre-voc that came up during public comment. So pre-vocational is a service we put in place, I'm going to say around 2016 or 2017, that replaced our workshop as we began eliminating the front door, closing the front door on traditional sheltered workshop. We've seen it has been effective in changing that trend. That service, when it was put in the waiver, was to be time limited. And currently it has an incredibly low utilization, meaning there's little, and Krista can probably give specific numbers, there's little to no one using that waiver service, and that's why it's being, Krista has commented 0. So there's 0 people currently funded for pre-vocational services, so taking it out of the waiver is not impacting, we won't be discharging anybody from that service. It's just an elimination of what we used as a placeholder while we were trying to downsize our reliance on traditional sheltered workshops. And there's still a transitional service, which is where most of the people in pre-voc went to, and Krista can fill you in a little bit more about transitional services. But the impact, and for folks who are looking or considering making comments or feedback on the waiver, the removal of pre-voc won't impact anybody we support. Regional disparity. Yeah, I was a provider. I used to complain about it all the time, Pat. And while we've gotten better at it in some ways, and part of that, I'm going to tell you, is that we came, because things were all over the map and there wasn't a lot of consistency, we put in place some really good black and white rules. And we have some very tremendous rule followers. As we're exploring more flexibility in our services, getting everybody to enjoy the space in the gray between black and white, some people are more comfortable in it than others. So I hear you loud and clear. I have work to do to make sure that people are being as flexible and creative as is allowed by the waivers and any other particular laws, policies, and procedures. So I appreciate the reminder. Prior to Peter's retirement, even though he's back, he made it clear to me that the department historically uses a pendulum to guide system change, and we often overshoot to get people to move in the direction, and I'm talking about our staff, to move in the direction we want to go, and then need to come back, because if we don't swing out far enough, we never get everybody all the way to the middle. And so this is, I think, one of those situations where we haven't swung out all the way on the flexibility and the gray and the being creative. And we do have to be careful, because there are definitely things we can't do or aren't fundable or aren't allowable. But I will work on that issue as well. A lot of my work this month, and since we last visited, has been around some of these initiatives, also discussing a variety of matters with advocacy groups that have come to light, and really trying to focus and work with the administration on some of our workforce issues, and working behind the scenes on a lot of the ARPA stuff in the background. And I'm going to save enough time so that Krista can really hopefully share out on that. But that's where I've been spending my time, getting ready for budget option season, which leads to legislative session, and I know February seems far away for many people. It seems like next week to me, that session will start. I'm sure Kevin is feeling it too. And I know there's an election between now and then, and a lot can change. And there's some new relationships that'll be built. Oh, it's January this year. That's why February seems so close, because it's actually January. So now it seems like tomorrow, never mind next week. There will be a lot of new legislators this year. There are a number of people not returning to their seats. That will give both me and people in our advocacy community an opportunity to do some meet and greet around to make sure that our issues are on their radar. Not everybody comes into the political arena realizing the work that we do, and that they will have a voice in what we do. And so there's some familiar faces on both sides of the aisle that are leaving us, who've been good champions. And I'm gonna miss some names, but I'm sure you know them. But I worked very closely with two of them in particular in the last couple of years. Dr. Bill Pettit, who many of you know as a representative, and many more of you know, given his family tragedy many years ago. He was a very interesting man to work with, who had really good insight into what we did as a doctor and as just a caring human. And the other person who's walking away at this time is Representative Abercrombie. Most people refer to them as the Cathys. Kathy Austin and Kathy Abercrombie have been huge in our community for advancing issues and for listening to families. Certainly Rep. Abercrombie's departure will have a seat that and someone to replace them that we'll need to get to know. And we'll know a lot more about that come November. And that's not a lot of time from election day to the start of session to get on their radar. But I'm certain that's heavy on the minds of our advocates. And certainly some work that Kevin and I have before us coming up. And I'm going to stop there. Rick, I don't know if there's anything that you were expecting me to cover that I didn't. I'm just trying to be mindful of time and the fact that we have a number of people who wanted to hear a lot about ARPA and the waivers, I think. Or maybe it's just the waivers. I'm not looking at the agenda, so.
Yeah, no, I think you've covered it. And I think let's turn the ball over to Krista. Christine, you have a question? Go ahead.
You're muted, Christine.
Muted.
Try again. My sign is not so good.
Takes it so long that it removes itself. Sorry. Christine Hainsworth Strauss. I have a quick question, and tell me if you feel this should go into a different department, Jordan. But today I was made aware of some of the changes when you have an individual who has a DDS budget for self-hire and self-direction, and you have that person also might have CFC budget to try and do this new EVV system. They are not coming together. Sometimes I was all set up for using one dashboard for multiple clients, and then also with multiple employees. And this, what you may not be aware of, is that when you deal with the tech representative from one, they know nothing about the other, and you have to call two different phone numbers and get two different sets of passwords. I finally was able to work with them today to get it relinked back where we were a couple months ago. And this puts a lot of, I can't even imagine someone trying to do self-direction if they were actually the individual hiring, not just a family member, which I pointed out to them. And so I asked a bunch of IT questions. So I don't know if there's somebody I can speak to about this to make this simpler for families, because it's been extremely hard for the last many months. And it's kept me from doing other work that I would like to do to move other issues forward.
So I'll let Krista address it more fully. One, you're not alone. Two, it's not the only electronic system. I can tell you that Stella probably has 5 MyCharts accounts that exist and that are supposed to all be linked. And I have to have like 2 phones with me at a medical appointment to make sure I have everything there. So it's not just SanData or our EVV platform, but there is some news in that arena on a couple of fronts, and I'm not sure how much I'm allowed to say about certain aspects of it. So I'm going to let Krista do that so I don't get myself in any trouble.
Good evening, everyone. I'm hoping that you can hear and see me now. I was having some technical issues. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, I'll introduce myself first. Very nice to see most of you. It's great to be back to the council. I'm Krista Ostaszewski. I'm the Health Management Administrator. I oversee the DDS Medicaid waivers. I think I can say I'm still a little bit new to this position. Prior to that, I did the legislative and communications work for the agency. So I was very involved in participating in the council meetings on a regular basis. So it is nice to be back. First, Christine, I just want to be able to address your question a little bit. What I can say is that DDS and DSS are aware of some of the complications you're articulating, right? So when there is a person who self-directs their supports through DDS, but also has a CFC through DSS, both have EVV requirements. And I think we've all acknowledged that there could be a better job of sort of aligning and streamlining that process. So what I can say is that we're aware of it. I think we're looking at hopefully making some changes to make that process a little bit more streamlined and easier for families that have two separate supports coming from two separate agencies. I know, Commissioner, you said there might be some news in that arena. I'm not sure we're ready to release that news just yet, but that news will be out and about sooner rather than later. And in the meantime, Christine, if you do have questions related to EVV, we've got a few different EVV staff experts that have been really integrated directly into that work full time, and they'd be happy to work with you if you have any other outstanding questions. Nice to see you also. Rick, I don't know, do you want me to jump right into the waivers?
Well, actually, we're supposed to have Shannon's ombudsman report first. So why don't we do that? We have 2 months of ombudsman reports. So Shannon, although it was summertime, was very, very busy. So perhaps you can summarize what's been going on for us.
Sure. This is Shannon Giacovino, the DDS ombudsperson. For the members of the public who are here, you can view my reports on the DDS website. If you go to the ombudsperson's page, it is under public information. So all of my reports are posted, and I send my report to the council prior to the meeting. So I won't be going through the whole report, but I will be trying to address the areas that members of the council have asked me to. I first want to say that my primary concern is about the staffing crisis, because most of the calls that I get are either directly related to the staffing crisis or are much more difficult to resolve because providers are really at full capacity. And so the staffing crisis kind of impacts almost everything. The other thing I wanted to just bring up in terms of some of the concerns that were raised by some of the parents here were that I think with the ARPA funds and with the expansion of options, there are options that will be available to people who have all levels of need, because LAs and CRSs are not the only living options or support options that are available to people with high levels of need. And so hopefully the work that we're doing through the ARPA process will expand options for everybody. So I just wanted to say that as well. In terms of addressing the areas that council members asked me about in my report, I'll start with my concern about the guardianship statistics in the state of Connecticut. Recently in an internal meeting, the director of diversity, inclusion, and equity, diversity, and inclusion, Dr. Ellis, had a coffee conversation, and she highlighted the guardianship statistics for the state of Connecticut as compared to other states, and it was the topic of our conversation. So Connecticut has the third highest number of guardianships of any state in the country. Only 17% of people with IDD don't have guardians in Connecticut. 10% have limited guardianship, and 72.3% have full guardianship or plenary guardianship. I think I mean, I know that that Rick Rothstein has requested that the council invite someone to come in and talk about alternatives to guardianship. I think that's a great idea. And I think that whenever our state is an outlier in any area, it's something that's worth a discussion. And we should understand why our state has, significantly more guardianships than most other states in the country. I have thoughts about that, but I think that's probably for another time. Another item that I was asked to address was number 4 in my report about individuals with funding who are unable to find employment and day programs due to the staffing crisis. The question is what do I do to support those people? So when I get those phone calls, the first thing that I do is to reach out to DDS to find out what DDS is doing to address that issue. Are they reaching out to programs? And, in every single case, they are. DDS is doing everything they can to find a program, and providers are just saying no because they don't have capacity. I also talked to those families about considering self-direction so that they can utilize the funding that they have to have some meaningful activity for their loved one while they're waiting for a program. And then I tell them to call their legislators to let their legislators know how the staffing crisis is impacting their family, because ultimately, I think that's an issue that legislators need to be aware of, and they're the ones who are in a position to, increase funding for staffing. So the next issue I was asked to address was number 19 on my report, which was referral and information to people with autism and assistance to families and establishing a parent guardian meeting at the Northwest Regional Center. And that is simply at the Lower Fairfield County Regional Center. They have a very active parents group that's been in existence for many years, and the families at the Northwest Regional Center are interested in having a group so that they can just establish regular communication. Those families aren't part of the regular RAC structure. So these meetings allow the families to get together as a community with each other, to share information with each other, but also to ask questions and get information from DDS. And so I'm just helping those families to get that going out there. The next issue I was asked to address was item 10 on my report, which is support for families of individuals with high levels of need and seeking DDS residential support options. And so I often get phone calls from families who have loved ones with high levels of need, who either aren't interested in a group home or don't see a group home as an option because they're aware that there's a waiting list, and they want to know what other options can be explored. And so when I get those calls, what I usually do is connect those families with the ARC Connecticut to talk to the executive director there. He's very knowledgeable on different kinds of supports, and because a lot of times people come with ideas about what they would like to do, and I'm not always as knowledgeable about the waiver and what's allowed under the waiver as other people are. And so I usually have them reach out to the ARC, and then I reach out to people within DDS to try to get their specific questions answered about, what is allowable and what's not allowable under the waiver. Patty, I see your hand is up, and I'm gonna get to you. I'm gonna get through these if that's okay, and then I'll get to you. The next thing I was asked to address was item 23, which is family issues and complaints about the abuse and neglect investigation process. And the question is, do families find the process difficult to understand? And the answer is yes. And or are families unhappy with how investigations are handled? And the answer is also yes. You know, usually when someone reaches out to me, it's because they have a problem. And this is something I've talked to the commissioner about, and I've talked to other people in DDS about, is that I do think we need to have better communication with families when there's an investigation about how the process works, and really exploring. There's some information people can't have due to the nature of the investigation, but I think whatever information we can give people, we should be giving people, because I don't think there's anything that's more upsetting or disturbing for a family member than knowing that there's an investigation happening and not knowing what's going on, or possibly being investigated themselves and not knowing what's going on. And so I think our communication in that area needs to improve. So those are the issues that I was asked to address, and I see that Patty has her hand raised. So do you have a question, Patty?
You're muted, Patty.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Patty Silva. Sorry, my team is very, very glitchy. So is there anything more that you can share on number 22, Shannon? The nature of the complaint from neighbor about DDS funded loan?
If you could mute yourself, Patty, there's feedback. This is Shannon Giacovino, the DDS ombudsperson. I'm going to be honest. I get a lot of calls and I deal with a lot of issues. So unless I know specifically what you want to address, I can't always pull that information off the top of my head. So I don't have it. But what I will do is I will look back in my notes. And if it's something that I feel I can share with the council, or if there are things that I can share with the council, I'll do that through an email. It's not often that I get those kinds of calls. That's actually the first time I've gotten a call like that.
Thank you, Shannon. Are there people who are contacting you about having residential funding and not being able to find a residential location due to staffing or other reasons?
Well, I am working with DDS and one family where a provider has withdrawn supports, and DDS has been unable to find a provider that will provide support. So we're working through that. And actually there's another family of a individual who aged out of the school system who was receiving residential supports that were funded through DCF. And DDS has been unable to, at this point, find residential supports for him. And so, so yes, it's impacting people who have residential funding as well.
Okay, thank you. Certainly seems like you're staying busy, Shannon.
Yeah, people are keeping me busy, and I just wanted to let people from the public know that I'm going to put my contact information in the chat if anybody needs to get in touch with me.
Thank you very much, Shannon. Glad you're doing what you're doing. We couldn't have anyone better. So we're glad you're there. And with that, let's move over to Krista for the waiver report.
Hi everyone, Krista Ostaszewski again. So I've been asked to do a presentation for the council specifically on the upcoming waiver renewal and amendments. So what I would like to do, if the council would indulge me, is go through a little bit of detail about the waiver renewal and amendment process in terms of timeline and where there's opportunities for public input and public comment, and then be able to dive a little bit deeper into the actual waiver changes that the department and the state are proposing for this time around. I am going to attempt to share my screen because I have a little bit of an Excel spreadsheet that'll provide some context and be able to guide the conversation. So give me one moment. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Can everyone see that?
No, not on the phone.
That's okay. I'm still going to be able to talk through it. So for those on Teams, are you able to see the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
We can
Thank
see
you.
it with.
Krista, can you blow it up just a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I am going to start by talking a little bit about the actual process for amending a waiver or the waiver or renewing a waiver. So DDS has 3 Medicaid waivers. We have the comp waiver, the individual and family support waiver, and the EDS waiver, the employment and day supports waiver. Each of those waivers needs to be renewed and approved by CMS every 5 years. So if we don't renew our waiver at the 5-year mark, then our waiver doesn't exist anymore. So the waiver renewal process is really important, and we have to do that every 5 years. The waivers have a 5-year lifespan, and we need to go through the process to renew them to keep them active. We also have the ability to make amendments through waivers. An amendment essentially is making a change to a waiver. So if we find a substantive change within a waiver that needs to be made, we have the ability to amend it. However, there is a very specific process that must be followed for both renewing a waiver and amending a waiver. That process is outlined not only in state statute, but by CMS on the federal level. So the first section here really just gives a brief outline of what that process is, right? So the first part of the waiver renewal or amendment process is we have to do a notice of intent, which is essentially a summary of all the changes the state wants to make for our waivers. And that has to be published in the Connecticut Law Journal, as well as published on both the DSS and DDS websites. And it has to solicit public comment. So we need to allow for at least 30 days of public comment, where individuals from the public can read the summary of the changes and provide feedback on what those changes are. Those public comments would come to me for the waivers, and they would be packaged and then provided to CMS and the legislature as well. But that is a required part of the process, not only in state statute, but in also by the federal government. So currently, for our IFS waiver renewal and the amendments that we're making for both comp and EDS, we are in this first portion of that process, which is the public comment period. After the public comment period, after those 30 days go by, we then have to submit a letter of intent to the committees of cognizance over at the Connecticut General Assembly, essentially saying we want to amend or renew our waivers. Here are the changes we would like to propose. Here are the public comments we've received after the last 30 days. And we would like your feedback. The legislature has the ability to then schedule a public hearing within 30 days of receiving that notice. This is optional for the legislature, but in most cases, they will always schedule a public hearing. I think out of the few years I've been doing this, they have waived the public hearing once. So in most cases, the legislature holds a public hearing. And that's so the public can participate and provide feedback about the proposed changes, but also allows the committees of cognizance to actually vote on the potential amendments and renewal. So the legislature will vote to move those amendments and renewals forward. Commissioner, I'm sorry, are you raising your hand? I think you are.
Yes.
Yes. Could you just list the committees of cognizance so that they would know where to find the appropriate chairs if they wanted to speak with them?
Absolutely. So we have the Public Health Committee is actually the DDS's Committee of Cognizance, but we also need to provide notice to Human Services. as a committee of cognizance, because DSS is the single Medicaid agency. Their committee of cognizance is Human Services. DDS, we operate our 3 waivers. Our committees of cognizance is Public Health. So you're looking at both of those committees. So after the public hearing is complete and the legislature approves the renewal and amendments to move forward, we then have to submit the drafts to CMS. CMS has to receive those drafts at least 90 days in advance from when the renewal needs to be effective. So the upcoming cycle that we're working on now, which is the IFS waiver renewal and amending all 3 waivers, the IFS waiver needs to be renewed by February 2023. So we essentially need to have all of our draft proposed changes over to CMS by November. The reason why I like to start this presentation with the timeline is to show how long this process takes, right? And how it allows the public to be a part of the process, right? Not only submit public comments, but in the public hearing process, it allows the public to come and provide feedback and thoughts about the proposed changes. So I see a few hands up, and I'm going to defer to you, Rick, on if you want me to take questions as they come up, or if we should wait until the end.
Well, your choice, but why don't we take them? Adrian, I know, is one of them.
Okay.
I can't see who the other one is.
So I would just ask maybe if Joe or Kevin, if you...
What does IFS mean? What does EDS mean? What does comp mean? A lot of people won't know what that means.
Yeah,
we have many guests at the meeting.
Yeah,
okay, so just define things a little more slowly. Thank
I
you.
apologize, Adrian. I'm trying to get through a lot of information and I want to be cognizant of everyone's time, but I have absolutely no problem with describing acronyms, and I apologize. I had thought I had went through those. And so the EDS is Employment and Day Supports Waiver. IFS is the Individual and Family Supports Waiver, and the COMP is the Comprehensive Waiver. And I know I speak fast, so don't hesitate to say, slow down. Are there other questions? I can't see the chat very well.
I don't see any other hands being raised at the moment. Joe Carvalho, DDS.
Thanks, Joe. All right, so I'm going to move right into our proposed changes. Again, these are proposed changes. There is a long process of review and approval that has to move forward, and there's lots of opportunities for public comment and public feedback. So as we have these discussions, I do like to make sure that we are facilitating the conversation as proposed and draft changes. So the first thing we are doing is we are proposing to collapse, I should say, personal supports into IHS, which is in-home supports. Really, right now, personal supports and in-home supports, they essentially provide very, very similar supports and services. Their rates are already aligned. So by combining the 2 services, we're actually allowing for families and individuals to have a little bit more flexibility. Right now, what happens, and you'll see that we use this approach a few times throughout our proposed changes, where we're collapsing and combining services. By doing that, we're allowing families and individuals to have more flexibility. If a family needs to change their support even a little bit, right now, they have to go through an authorization process in order to do that. If we're combining services, making them a little bit more expansive to cover more supports and services, then that doesn't have to happen. An authorization doesn't have to happen every time there's a small change in the support and service needed. So you'll see that we're taking that approach throughout the process. By no means are we eliminating or removing any supports and services when we're combining supports and services, right? We're taking the 2 supports and services and we're mushing them together. So the intent is never to remove or minimize supports and services throughout that process. The next proposed change, which I know the commissioner has already touched upon, is the removal of pre-voke services. And like the commissioner mentioned a little bit earlier this evening, we currently have no authorizations for pre-voke. So no one is actively receiving the service. and no one is authorized to receive the service. As the commissioner noted, this service was added a few years ago and was really meant to be a temporary service to help people transition because of the closing of sheltered workshops. The service was really facility-based, pre-vocational type supports. And what we looked at is not only is no one receiving the supports, but we have alternative services and supports in our waivers currently that better allow individuals to explore pre-work options, right? So we have a service called transitional services, employment transitional services, which really allow an individual to explore employment-based options in a community-based setting. It is considered a pre-vocational service. It provides a lot of flexibility, and it gives an individual the opportunity to perhaps learn some employment-based skills, but doesn't necessarily have to be an employment-based service. We also still have our day supports in our waivers. We've got their group day support. We've got our individualized day support. So we believe that by removing pre-voc services, we're not eliminating a supported service. Especially because no one is utilizing that supported service. And we think that the array of services that we have in our waivers currently really meet the needs of all of the individuals we support and all different levels of need. Commissioner, I know that you're on. I just want to make sure to give you an opportunity to speak if there's anything I've left off about that one, because I know a lot of people are interested in learning about sort of the thought process there.
I don't have anything to add unless there's specific questions from the group.
All right, well, I'm going to keep moving along, and if there are questions that come up, feel free to put them in the chat or do the raise hand option. I'm also available to have conversations on any of these items separately, if that would be helpful. I'm also happy to come to groups or advocacy organizations or just meet with families to have a more detailed dialogue about any of these changes. I'm always happy to work with anyone that may be interested in having a conversation. So the next change that we're looking at is adding a virtual mechanism to individualized day supports. This is something that has already been offered temporarily through our Appendix K in public health emergency. So it's temporarily available currently, but we don't have permanent authority to provide individualized day virtually. So by doing this, we would be able to gain permanent authority to have this option available. The next proposed change that we're looking at is increasing some of our service caps. So we are looking to increase our assistive technology service cap by 10,000. So now it would be capped at 25,000. We would be looking to increase our vehicle modification cap to 25,000, and then increasing our environmental modification cap to 35,000. So essentially it's a $10,000 increase to each of the caps. The next thing we're looking to do is add a meal delivery service as a new waiver service. And we're excited about this. We've heard a little bit about questions, needs. We know that there are some meal delivery services available through towns, but it isn't very consistent. So we're excited, and hopefully we will see this option move forward. This service is not going to be able to be provided in a setting that has room and board. So like a CRS, a CLA, we wouldn't be able to provide that service there. However, we would be able to provide it in an individual's own home or a family home. And we could be able to sort of work with the meal delivery service to match specific dietary needs. So we know that some of the individuals we support have specific dietary needs, and it is difficult to get food prepared to meet those needs. This service will help that process move forward. So we're looking forward to seeing this move through the process. The next thing we're looking to propose is just increasing the waiver caps in general. So right now, our EDS waiver, which is our employment and day supports waiver, that is capped at $58,000. Our proposal is to increase that waiver to $75,000. Our IFS waiver, our individual and family support waiver, right now is at $130,000. We're looking to increase that to $165,000. Our comprehensive waiver is set at 150% of the average institutional level of care. That will stay the same. And the reason that will stay the same is because inflation and fluctuation is already included in sort of that formula. Commissioner, I see your hand.
Yeah, I just want to add that increasing the cap in the waiver doesn't increase the funding for an individual. It doesn't change our lawn table. It doesn't change our appropriation from the legislature or money afforded to us through the governor's budget or OPM. It's simply a mechanism to increase the cap, what we can spend and recover 50% federal revenue where that applies. And it allows for some flexibility for some unique needs, but it will also allow for any rate increases. So people who are already bumping up against the cap, if we didn't raise the cap and we saw another wage increase or we saw a rate increase, this would allow us to do so. Some people were very close to the cap following the recent minimum wage rules that were put in place that increased our rates. So I just want to make sure that people don't conflate the two, that funding and appropriation is separate from caps.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right, so I think we have two more proposed changes. The next is that we are rolling the independent support broker service into the IDGS service, and that is the individual direct services, the individualized direct goods and services service. This is where you see the IDGS supervisor role fall under, right? So under self-direction, there is a support where you can hire a supervisor to essentially assist an employer of record, right? So what we're doing here is we are planning to roll the independent support broker service into IDGS. We've watched over the years and looked at some trends, and essentially the independent support broker service really has dwindled over the years because the IDGS service just has more flexibility. It allows for many more sort of supervisory and training opportunities for a potential supervisor. So what we're proposing to do is combine the two. And we actually are planning to expand IDGS a little bit more to make sure that no one is losing supports and services. So if you take a look at what we're actually articulating in our waiver, is we're expanding the IDGS waiver service to make sure all of the components of the independent support broker are put into IDGS. So really, we're taking that service and we're expanding it and we're combining the two. It allows for flexibility. It allows for that role, that hired supervisor role, to be able to do a lot more. And then the very last proposed change is something that we're excited about. We watched a few states amend their waivers to essentially allow for certain services and supports to be provided in a hospital setting during a temporary stay. And essentially what this does is it allows for an individual who has a temporary stay at a hospital, still active on the waiver, to still be able to receive some DDS supports and services. So we are expanding the IHS, the in-home supports, the IDS, individualized day supports, and our companion support to be allowed to be provided during a temporary stay in the hospital, as long as it's not replacing or duplicating the services that the hospital is required to provide. We're really looking forward to sort of watch this move through the process. It's been successful in 2 other states that I'm aware of. And I think it will add a lot of potential assistance throughout the process. We know through COVID, this would have been extremely helpful. And I think, you know, during hospital stays, there is a lot of worry about a person having a break in supports and services. This would allow for some consistency throughout that stay. I will note, depending on how far this moves, we are planning to have some conversations with the Hospital Association to make sure that there's a collaborative approach in how this would work. So there is going to need to be some discussions and some work to make this really work well and move forward smoothly and seamlessly. But we're looking forward to watch the progress, and we'll see where it lands. But we are excited about that. I see a few hands up. So this is the end of my presentation. I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm happy to take questions. I'm not sure.
I believe Rick has a question.
Yeah, I have a question, or a comment, actually. Two questions and a comment. Back a couple of years ago, the department experimented with a combined rate where someone could be awarded a rate which was for day and residential together, something that could be varied based upon their very ever-changing medical condition or other circumstances, so that if regularly someone did a certain split of time, but suddenly had to go to a split of time where they were home more instead of being at work more, that could be accomplished instead of having to adjust things all the time. Is that something that made it, or is still under consideration, or just decided that just doesn't work?
So if I can, and Krista, correct me if I'm wrong, the mechanism for that was a pool of money that was a pilot where we requested utilization of certain funds to provide that service. And I don't have the data on what the pilot produced. I don't think was a waiver restriction that prevented us from allowing people to spend their service dollars in the setting of their choice. That is more I don't know what the acronym stands for, Adrian, so forgive me, but we refer to our budgeted line items as SIDs, S-I-D. It means something to somebody somewhere. It doesn't mean anything to me other than we have a day SID with several different billable codes, and we have a residential SID with several billable codes. What wasn't allowed outside of the pilot is to use money appropriated as a residential service for day and money appropriated for a day service to provide residential supports. The pilot was intended to demonstrate the efficacy of pooling those dollars and using them, allowing a certain number of people to experiment what it would mean instead of having two different buckets to live out of, to have one bucket and to meet all their needs. But I'm going to have to follow up with staff internally, unless Krista, you know where we stand with that pilot. I think I have to go back and find out where we are and where that's headed, but I don't think that was a waiver restriction.
You're absolutely correct, Commissioner. There's nothing precluding us in the waiver from doing that. I think it was more of a state structure conversation in that we have those separate budget line items, those SIDs, right? I don't know what that stands for either, by the way. That really articulate where that money needs to be coming from. So, and I am not sure where that pilot landed. I believe the pilot has concluded. I just don't know where the next steps are for there. So, Rick, from a waiver perspective, there is nothing precluding us from doing something like that. I think it's more of a state structure conversation.
Right, and it's starting to come back to me now that one of the long-term goals for that was to combine the budget lines so that the legislature would appropriate one line, and then the department could allocate that as it needed to. So yeah, that is coming back to me now. The other was we have under our current system, we are unable to pay family members, other than under, I guess it's allowable under Appendix K. And is that something that's was considered, or is that something that's going to remain unallowable?
Yeah, so great question, Rick. We did have a small window under our Appendix K in which paying guardians was allowable. Appendix K, just for some reference, was essentially our emergency appendix that allowed us to have more flexibility above and beyond our waiver during the public health emergency. Although the Appendix K is still active, so a lot of that flexibility under Appendix K is still active. The provision specific to paying guardians has ended. That ended in July of 2021. So we don't have the ability to pay guardians at this time. There were some discussions about exploring the ability to pay guardians from a permanent authority perspective. And there's been a lot of discussions on a national level. CMS for a while made it very clear that that was not something they were supportive of. I think Appendix K has opened that door a little bit, and states are starting to explore that process. I'm aware of maybe 2 other states that are amending their waivers to include that. We're watching that process. We're watching to see what is CMS looking for, what are they asking for, what sort of safeguards are they looking for to have in place. So this is a new journey for states, I will say. Even the national organization that the commissioner is a part of, NASDs, they've put on some webinars for state partners to really talk about some of the struggles and conversations around what paying guardians would look like and what safeguards need to be in place in the waiver where CMS would make it approvable. So we're participating in those discussions. We're learning a lot in those discussions, and I think that we will probably have some additional discussions moving forward. Commissioner?
And I just want to clarify, it is possible to pay relatives.
Not guardians.
The people, not guardians and not employers of record and not biological parents, I think remains an exclusion. I believe grandparents, siblings, aunts and uncles can all be paid as long as they are not the guardian, not the employer, and not the employer of record. And correct me if I'm wrong, Krista, but I think I got that right.
The only clarification is it's biological parents for minor children. So if there's an adult with 2 biological parents, one is the guardian, one is not, the non-guardian can be paid for supports and services if it's an adult. So the the parent restriction, the biological parent restriction, is for minor children. So there's always,
and if it's an adoptive parent, then there's not a problem.
I believe, well, I'd have to confirm that, but it is written as biological.
It's a technicality. I am excited about the last thing that you talked about in terms of the hospital care, because that has come up in our family situation. Fortunately, not recently, but it did years ago, and we were able to work it through, but many years ago. So,
yeah, and I'm gonna steer this to Pat in a second because she has her hand up. I just wanted to add to the paying a caregiver while in the hospital. And Krista articulated, there's a comprehensive rate paid to the hospital, so the service that we would pay somebody can't be duplicated.
Right.
We have on a case-by-case basis upon request, either by provider or family, considered state funds only to provide staff familiar with the individual in the hospital, where we believe that a lack of familiar presence would either increase behavior, decrease communication, or otherwise be contraindicated for a positive health outcome. And we have done that in limited circumstances, although I think I've probably opened the door a little bit more on that than prior administrations, because it is a slippery slope. But I do think that there are times where people are in the hospital, they will be there longer and they will be less healthy if we don't provide for familiar care. And so we have done that in certain instances. This would allow us, this would take me and my seat out of the equation, so that not all of those situations have to be approved through my office, which is how all state funded situations are currently approved. Pat, you have a question?
Oh, I'm even unmuted. This is good. So is this okay to bring up ideas that weren't mentioned, or are we only supposed to be commenting on those that you presented?
So to be clear, our submission on the waiver is in. So
Okay.
while you may share it here,
Okay.
you would need to make an official public comment either in writing, I don't know, or at the hearing when that time presents itself, for the legislature or us to consider formally changing what's been submitted. Although if you want to socialize the idea here, I don't know that anyone would object. I just want you to know you may be called upon for a repeat performance, Pat.
Okay. Okay. I had a couple of questions. One, has there any thought been given to allowing people who self-direct to have some kind of an emergency fund, so that if something goes awry, that they can tap into some category to help replace people that in the event that they have a staffing crisis? Since, you know, that's something that agencies are able theoretically to be able to do, maybe not in actuality anymore, but theoretically they have other people to draw on. So I'm just wondering, for in the world of self-directed, that doesn't really exist as a category. And has there been any thought on how to create a category like that, so people had some kind of a security net if something goes awry with their current staffing?
Commissioner, do you want me to take that one?
If you're ready and queued up, go for it.
Absolutely. So thank you, Pat. I think that's a really great suggestion. What I would say is I'm not necessarily sure the waiver would be the conduit to get something like that moving. But what I did want to sort of respond to your question about is we've got some really progressive initiatives moving forward through ARPA, right? The American Relief and Recoveries Act. That, just for some context, and I know that discussion has been a part of this meeting prior, that has allowed for there to be some federal infusion of money to be used to expand and enhanced home and community-based supports. One of the things DDS identified as needed some additional support really was putting in a system that allows for the retention of direct support professionals under a self-directed supports, right? The ability to find direct support professionals and hire them, right? Can there be some sort of platform that specializes in allowing that? So we've been working very closely. I believe we had an RFP that was awarded to a selected bidder relatively recently. And that role of that vendor really is to create a platform to help support the hiring and retention of direct support professionals. One of the other things that I believe is being looked at through that process is putting in sort of an on-call emergency backup support process for the situation you just articulated, Pat, right? When a direct support professional doesn't show up and an individual is left without care, there has to be some sort of system in place to help provide those supports when needed. So that is also something that's being looked at through the ARPA initiative. I don't have any details in terms of timeline or what exactly that's going to look like, but I think it was important to just articulate that there were things that we identified as a need and hopefully going to be able to move that forward.
Okay, that's good. And along the same lines, just a question. I forgot what the name of the category it was that you referred to. It's where the brokers are going to go in the future. What did you call? What's the name of that category?
So that's going to be that's the IDGS supervisor. Okay. So the indirect goods and services supervisor.
Got it. So in that section, when under the self-directed model, when it talks about hiring a supervisor, however the terminology is phrased, I think it's written as a percent of the direct care hours, if I remember this correctly. And if that's so, like, how did that percent ever become established? And is there going to be any flexibility in that?
So that's a really great question. I have to look at specifically the waiver language to pull that out. It's not at the top of my head, and I don't want to misstate or provide inaccurate information. So I'm happy to take that offline and see if I can find that percentage language that you're inquiring about. Again, the intent of that transition really was to be more flexible, allow for more flexibility. But I'm happy to take a look into what you're articulating. I just am not exactly sure, so I want to be able to understand it fully before I respond.
Okay. And then along that line, at least it used to be this way, unless I may be mistakenly putting this together, but I believe that every time a self-directed hire goes into, becomes employed, that every time they have to do the background check. And I'm wondering, so it's almost like what they establish in Family A doesn't get carried over to Family B. And I'm wondering if that can be changed, because it seems really redundant and a waste of money to me. Do you understand what my question is?
Yeah, there are conversations, because it's broader than that. If you're a CFC employee and a DDS employee, you might have to provide supporting training documents, or your training dates have to be in accordance with your hire dates between the two, and you could be providing supports to the same person, right? And so, and then within DDS, I might work for you and I might work for Adrian, but I have two employers of record and two sets of data. So we are having some conversation about that. Again, that wouldn't be a waiver component. That's what we would call an internal bureaucratic mess that we are trying to fix. Okay. I think that's the official. I don't know an acronym for internal bureaucratic mess, but is that IBM?
IBM.
Huh. Who knew?
And then I think this might be almost my last question. The meals that can come in, and you talked about they're not going to be allowed in CRSs and CLAs. Will they be allowed in apartments and homes where there's shared clustered supports?
So Pat, I think in most cases where there's a shared clustered support, it's an in-home service. And as long as there's no room and board being provided, which is a specific payment, then the meal delivery service would be allowable in that setting. What I'll say is generally what you're describing, I believe, does not have room and board, and therefore the meal delivery service would be allowable. But if there's a specific setting that you'd like me to look into just to confirm, I'm happy to do that. So generally, I'll say usually clusters are IHS, which don't have room and board. So the answer would be yes. But without knowing the specific setting, it's a little bit hard for me to detail. So if there is a specific setting, I'm happy to look into that.
Okay, just to clarify something you just said, maybe you can explain what you mean. When you say room and board, what does that mean exactly?
So room and board is a specific payment that comes through DSS for individuals living in a group home setting, for individuals living in a CRS. So it's part of an overall payment that comes through DSS when a person is on Medicaid and living in a certain setting. So that is essentially the bench that the waiver shows. I don't believe what you're articulating, right? The IHS cluster setting has a room and board, so the Meals on Wheels would be allowable in that setting. But I'm happy to look into that specifically. And there will be some settings where we'll have to look at specifically and say, is it allowable? Is it not allowable?
CRSs, to my knowledge, don't get room and board, but we'll clarify that.
Yeah, that's what I was confused. I was going right back to that point, Mary.
That might be my mistake. I apologize. I'm trying to remember what we specified in the waiver. So
yeah, it's a comprehensive service, but isn't afforded room and board, which is paid by DSS, not DDS.
So if someone was Rick Rothstein, Secretary of the Council, Krista, so if someone was getting the rent subsidy program living in a CRS, would that disqualify them from a meal service?
The way we propose the definition, I don't believe it would. So I think that would be allowable in that support. What I will do, just to make sure that I'm giving accurate information, is I actually want to pull up the waiver service definition as we wrote it, how we drafted it, to make sure that it's consistent and it's clear. So I'm happy to do that, and I can provide that to Joe and Kevin for the notes for the next meeting. Of course.
Okay, Christine.
Wait, I have one more question. Sorry. This is Pat Tyler, then I'll stop talking. I have one last thing. I'm curious if there, maybe this is a bureaucratic, whatever Jordan said, maybe it's a bureaucratic mess, and maybe it's not a waiver question. You can clarify for me. When you have somebody who receives individualized support, it seems that it gets very messy when that individual participates with others that have either group support or their own individual support in terms of the way these services get billed for. Do you understand my question so far, Krista? Is there ever going to be a time where that becomes looser or more easily able to facilitate natural interactions between people? Because I think it's pretty restrictive right now, because you almost feel like, you know, if two people were there and they both had staff people, you almost feel like staff B shouldn't spend 15 minutes with staff A because they can't really bill for it. So it makes for sort of an unnatural like barrier to just human interaction. And I'm wondering if that can ever be loosened up.
Yeah, Pat, I think that question has a lot of different components to it that need to be reviewed. And I think some of those components are waiver related, some. But I would venture to say that most of them are probably internal policy procedure, or the way the commissioner described it, right? One of those bureaucratic situations that needs to be reviewed. I think really what needs to happen is there needs to be a larger conversation so we can look at all the facets of that request and try to determine if we can start chipping away at making that process easier. I'm not sure it's going to be one singular fix. I do think that there needs to probably be a holistic view of fixing something like that, that may include some restrictions that are waiver related. I'm thinking through a few of them potentially as we're having the discussion. So I'm not sure that's going to be something that we could address through one foul swoop. But I do think if it's something that we want to have a discussion about and look into, that we can do that. I think there's a few components there that probably could use some review. And hopefully by chipping away piece by piece, it could at least become a little bit of an easier process.
Okay.
Okay, Christine.
Hi, Krista, I have two quick questions. One is, can you share your spreadsheet with the council so we can just review that information?
That is easy enough. Yes, I am happy to do that. Not a problem. And what I can also do is I'll provide, I'll throw this in the chat right after the link to the public comment period. So you can see our notice of intent and the information that we post, and it gives all of my contact information if you wanted to provide a comment on any of the proposed changes that we're moving forward. So I'll provide my spreadsheet and I'll provide all of that information as well.
Thank you. And my second question is this. A few weeks ago, I became aware of an app that has been developed for the medical community for either facilities or for hospitals, apparently, to post. It's apparently like Uber, but for help services. And it's not available currently to families, but I'm wondering if there's some way through this mechanism of being able to access, say, the CFC budget or, the DDS budget for an individual to post, get authority to be on those. So when you have an intermittent need like we sometimes have, where you could post it, you can post the rate, and then somebody can pick up that day shift. And what a needed service it is right now to offer. Apparently nurses love it because they can choose their shifts. They can be in and out. I know it, the way we have to put employees on right now is very cumbersome. Sometimes takes quite some time to get someone approved, even if they're already approved within the system elsewhere. I don't know if this is somewhere to bring this up now because, 5 years is a long wait.
No, Christine, what I would say is if you know the name of the app that's used in the platform, I think we're open to any and all suggestions. We do have a selected bidder that is a vendor that is looking at some of those options as well. So if you want to send me or Kevin or Joe the name of that application that the hospitals are using, we can look into it. For
There
sure.
are 3 of them that are out there that are testing right now. I don't
Okay.
know if it's successful there, but I'll be happy to send that information along.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I think
Thank
our
you.
community could really benefit from it.
Okay, thank you, Krista. We're glad that you do this because I don't think anyone else could do this. This is, the waivers are like alphabet soup. So thank you. And we just have a couple more items to clear up here and we'll be on our way. We voted a few months ago to make a presentation at Bo Doherty upon his retirement from Special Olympics. And someone asked for an update on that. So it would be helpful if we could find out what's happening with that. Kevin, is that your bailiwick?
Kevin Bronson, DDS. I don't think so. I think Kevin Zingler and someone else was working on something, and I don't remember. Honestly, I don't remember off the top of my head, Rick.
Okay, I will follow that back up with them. Patty, are you up to speed on it? I thought it was your question.
It was my question. And the last that we knew back in June was that I think Kevin Zinger was going to submit it to House and leadership, but we don't know what's happened.
Okay.
Haven't
I
heard
will mention
anything.
it to him after the meeting. So we'll carry that over till next time.
Rick, this is
yeah.
Kevin Bronson. I don't mean to interrupt, but I want to say that I believe that at some point there's something to be drafted or not, and I don't remember if that happened and got shared around, Patty.
I did. Yeah, I drafted the proclamation many months ago, sent it along to everybody. Kevin was going to fill out the online form to submit it all, but we haven't heard anything, so okay, I don't know where that stands. And
as well.
So maybe we could request Kevin email us and let us know what the update is, because this has been quite a few months now, and I know the process itself could take time. So I'd like to know if it's even been submitted.
Yeah, particularly during election season, it could take even more time.
Yeah.
So I will follow up with Kevin on that.
And he's retired now, so Bo.
So anyway, item F on the agenda, creation of a subcommittee to review current DDS investigation procedures. We started almost a year ago with a meeting with the director of the Abuse Investigation Division, and she was able to provide us a lot of information. We have we received comments from Shannon over the months, and we had a series of questions that were presented to the commissioner, which he responded to, which provided us some good information. Some of us have had additional experiences since then, and Kevin and I discussed, and I believe Karen was in on it too at some point, that we perhaps form a subcommittee to kind of review where we're at and come up with a plan for moving forward. What kind of changes we would like to see to make it more transparent, more expeditious, and whatever else we think should be considered. Obviously, those would either be administrative, hopefully just be administrative changes, but theoretically it could be a legislative change. So I wanted to present for the council the opportunity to create the subcommittee today. Hopefully the committee can meet over the next month and come back to the council in October with some thoughts about a plan, suggestions for how we move forward. The reason to bring it up now is that we're reaching the end of the year. November is the joint meeting with the RACs, and December is our election meeting. So typically we don't take up other business at that time. So Adrian, you raised your hand.
Well, I think, yeah, I'm glad you brought this up again. I think it'd be good. I don't know if we need an official proposal. Probably we do, that our council create a subcommittee to discuss the challenges about the abuse and neglect investigation system, so that we can come up with some suggestions for DDS and or the legislature if necessary. Hopefully not, but we'll see. Obviously, listening to Shannon's, I mean, there's a few of us here who've had these challenges and been very frustrated and disappointed. And we hear from Shannon's ombudsman report, hi Shannon, that she gets these comments a lot as well. So I think it's not just a few of us, it's a bigger problem. So I would volunteer to make that a motion and be on this subcommittee.
Joe Carvalho, DDS. Adrian, was that your motion?
I think that was a motion.
That's
wonderful, wonderful.
It was my motion.
Is there a second?
It.
Patty?
I second it. Patty Salva.
Thank you, Patty. We will deal with volunteers in a moment. So Kevin Zingler has agreed to volunteer, and I've agreed to volunteer. We don't want too many people on there, and I think we would also request that Shannon volunteer for this as well, because she has provided a lot of background for us that could be helpful in coming up with solutions. There's a motion on the table to create a subcommittee, and with the hope of coming back with a plan in October. So hopefully we can do that in a couple of virtual meetings and work into everyone's schedule. Shannon?
So I don't know if I'm allowed to be a member of the subcommittee for the council. I see Kevin Bronson. Oh, this is Shannon Giacobino, the DDS ombudsperson. I'm sorry. I see Kevin's hand is raised, so maybe he can answer that for us. But I was going to offer to meet with the subcommittee to share my thoughts and to give you some feedback on the kinds of things that I hear from families when they call me.
Well, we have not dealt with that issue before. With the subcommittee that we had, well, two subcommittees that I can recall since I've been on the council, it did not involve a DDS employee, but we did have people from other groups and whatnot, none of whom were state employees. So, you know, that could be could be an issue, but we certainly would invite you to brief us and provide your input. Adrian?
Well, I was just going to say, why don't we invite Shannon as a consultant to our subcommittee? a free consultant.
Okay,
Rick.
so the motion is on the floor to form the subcommittee. Is there any discussion? Other discussion, Patty?
Yes. You haven't determined who the members of the subcommittee are yet, right?
No, we have not.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify.
But I'd say anyone who wishes to volunteer to let me know, and perhaps let Kevin Zingler know, and then we'll hammer out a small group to move forward. Anyway, so any other discussion? We'll call for a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Aye. Nay.
Aye.
Joe, are you recording the vote here? I can't. Any instance?
I am. It seems as though it passed unanimously.
Okay. So I vote yes, it passes unanimously. And that concludes our meeting. We have the next meeting will be October 20th.
I'm sorry, it doesn't conclude the meeting. I think there's one more agenda item.
Yeah, well, the topics for future meetings. We have been dealing with those through email, but if you want to raise something, then certainly you can.
I put it on email, and it was agreed in the minutes that are in July, right? That we were going to discuss or have Krista discuss the where we are on the federal impact of the Social Security asset limitations, because it's really affecting some of us doing those independent family supports and day services. So I think that we need to get a handle on where we are with this. And I know it was promised that it would be discussed at this meeting, and I did bring it up and did send it back for the agenda.
Okay. Kevin, perhaps you have an answer?
Yeah, Kevin Bronson, DDS. Well, two things real quick. Number one, Rick, you can officially invite Shannon to your subcommittee. You just have to invite her each time you meet. So
Okay.
that's the formal way to do it. She can come, but you just have to invite her. She can't be a member. And the second thing is, I saw Krista light up, but I'll let Krista speak to Christine's thing.
Thanks, Kevin. I know, I believe that we're running out of time a little bit. So what I would like to do, Christine, is better understand your question, and I'd be happy to provide Kevin with information to make sure that it's addressed at the next meeting. And if we think a presentation is necessary, I'm always happy to come back. When you talk about the Social Security asset limits, are you talking about the Medicaid Husky asset limits, the $1,600? That can preclude an individual from becoming eligible for Medicaid? No, I see you shaking your head. So you're talking.
There are two, and I'm sorry, I've unmuted. This is Christine Haynes-Strauss again. Yeah. I brought this up, I think, like in May or whatever, because several of the council members and the state ARC, we all went to the U.S. senators to talk to them about raising this limitation, which has not been changed since 1989 on our population. And I believe our U.S. senators were leading the introduction to getting this changed. And so it does impact both the Social Security limitations. So it limits our individuals, especially as they pay rent and do other things and move on in their lives. And then also how then is, so it does, my answer is not completely no, because how does the DSS then take that back, and how are they going to ever, if you raise that $2,000 limit from Social Security, but you don't raise the limit of $1,600 through DSS, it's impossible to do some of these creative solutions for employment for our kids. And so
absolutely,
as an adult children who are doing services.
Yep. So Christine, thank you so much for that additional clarification. That's really helpful. So what I can say right now is I'm not aware of any increases to the asset limits on the Social Security end or on the Medicaid end. What I'm happy to do is provide Kevin and Joe with an outline of the current income guidelines and asset limits to Husky Medicaid, and also to the Social Security. And maybe from there, if there's additional questions, I'd be happy to have conversations about that. I am not aware of any increases that have occurred recently. I know that Social Security did do an increase in terms of payments. It was a percentage increase in terms of payments, but I'm not aware of any changes in asset limits.
Yeah,
Christine, there is proposed legislation to increase the asset limit.
I understand.
And to significantly increase the amount paid for SSI, which has not changed in like forever, other than the COLA increases. But it was introduced late in the summer and not likely to pass this session. So it'll be starting all over again in January.
Mm-hmm.
So
I know I thought it had passed the U.S. Senate and had gone to the House. So that's why I didn't know where it had got left off. Also, then is there any mechanism for the state then to turn around and flip that within the DSS and make it, raise that limit so it's actually functional for the.
It would require separate action by the state to increase the limit. Yeah. So again, we'd be looking at sometime next legislative session at best.
But that's tomorrow.
So it's tomorrow in some
right.
respects, but hopefully there'll be a change. So anyway, I think that's all. Topics for future meetings. We will be considering the supported decision making as soon as Kathleen Hayes comes back from maternity leave, and I know there are a couple of other topics that folks have sent in for discussion topics. So, Adrian?
Well, just real quick about this asset limit. Since it's political time, I think that those of us that have contact with our senators or Congress people should talk to them about this, because chances are they have no idea what our families are going through with. A family like yours is going through with something like this, Adrian Benjamin, council member, sorry. And there is going to be a big forum in a few weeks of all the candidates for the state offices and Senate. And we need to bring this up to them. I know we have a lot of issues that we need them to pay attention to, but this is an important one. So it's time for us to advocate before this election, and of course, again after the election, because they just need to hear from us so that they know what's going on. Friendly reminder.
Okay. Well said. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Rick Lenz, second.
So moved.
Adrian. So we're adjourned. See you in October.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.